The coffee shop smelled like burnt beans and old carpet. Sarah Mitchell sat alone in the corner booth, her hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. She stared out the window at the gray Indiana sky, watching raindrops race down the glass. She had been back in Greenfield for 3 months now. 3 months since the discharge. 3 months since she left the sand and heat and chaos behind. 3 months since she stopped being Staff Sergeant Mitchell and became just Sarah. Nobody knew what to do with her. More coffee, hon? The waitress appeared with a pot, her smile tired but genuine. No, thank you, Sarah said quietly. The waitress lingered. You know, my nephew's thinking about joining up. Army, maybe. You were in, right? Sarah nodded. Did you see any action? Or were you mostly, doing paperwork and stuff? Sarah's jaw tightened. She had heard this question a dozen times already. Different people, same tone. The same assumption that because she was a woman, she must have spent her deployments behind a desk, filing reports and answering phones. I was a combat medic, Sarah said. Attached to infantry units, Afghanistan, 2 tours. The waitress's eyes widened slightly, but Sarah could see the doubt there. That flicker of disbelief. That look that said, sure you were, sweetheart. Well, that's real brave, the waitress said. But her voice carried no weight. She walked away before Sarah could respond. Sarah pulled her jacket tighter. It was an old Navy pea coat she had found at a thrift store. She didn't wear her uniform anymore. Didn't wear anything that identified her as military. It was easier that way. She left a $5 bill on the table and walked out into the rain. Greenfield, Indiana was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone. Where high school football was religion and the diner on Main Street had been serving the same meatloaf for 40 years. Sarah had grown up here. She had walked these streets as a kid, ridden her bike past the courthouse, spent summers at the public pool. But she had left at 18, signed her enlistment papers the day after graduation and never looked back. Now she was 32, and Greenfield felt like a foreign country. She walked past the barber shop where old men sat in the window, watching the world go by. Past the hardware store, past the memorial park where a bronze soldier stood on a granite pedestal, rifle in hand, honoring the town's veterans from wars long past. She didn't stop to look at it. Her apartment was above the old pharmacy on Elm Street, small, 1 bedroom. The heat didn't work right and the floorboards creaked, but it was hers. It was quiet. And quiet was what she needed. She climbed the narrow stairs and unlocked the door. Inside, the space was sparse. A couch, a coffee table, a small TV she rarely turned on. On the kitchen counter sat a bottle of pills prescribed by the VA doctor in Indianapolis that she also rarely touched. Sarah dropped her keys on the table and sank onto the couch. The silence pressed in around her. She closed her eyes, and immediately she was back. The Humvee's engine roared as it bounced over the rocky terrain. Sarah sat in the back, med kit on her lap, eyes scanning the horizon. Sergeant Kowalski was driving. Lieutenant Diaz was in the passenger seat. Corporal Barnes sat beside her, his rifle resting against his knee. 2 clicks out, Diaz said into the radio. ETA 3 minutes. They were headed to a village where an IED had gone off near a school. Reports said there were casualties. Civilians. Maybe children. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest, but her hands were steady. Stay sharp, Kowalski muttered. Then the world exploded. The blast lifted the Humvee off the ground and slammed it onto its side. Metal shrieked. Glass shattered. Sarah's head cracked against something hard, and for a moment everything went white. When her vision cleared, she tasted blood. Her ears rang. Smoke filled the cabin. Out. Get out! Someone was screaming. Sarah fumbled for her seatbelt, her fingers clumsy. She kicked the door open and tumbled onto the sand. Gunfire erupted around her. Bullets snapped through the air like angry insects. Medic! Barnes is hit! Sarah's training took over. She crawled to the front of the vehicle where Barnes lay on the ground, blood pooling beneath him. His eyes were wide with shock. I got you, Sarah said, her voice calm despite the chaos. I got you, Barnes. Stay with me. She ripped open his vest, her hands moving fast. Entry wound in the abdomen. Exit wound in the back. Bleeding bad? She packed the wound with gauze, applied pressure. Barnes screamed. I know, she whispered. But I need you to stay awake. Talk to me. Tell me about home. My daughter, Barnes gasped. She's 3. What's her name? Lily. Lily, that's beautiful. You're gonna see her again, Barnes. I promise." The firefight raged around them. Kowalski and Diaz were returning fire from behind the wreckage. The Taliban fighters were somewhere in the rocks above, unseen but deadly. Sarah worked. Her hands were slick with blood, but she didn't stop. She started an IV, gave him morphine, kept pressure on the wound. "Medevac's 10 minutes out," Diaz shouted. 10 minutes. Sarah didn't know if Barnes had 10 minutes, but she didn't let him see her fear. She held his hand and talked to him about his daughter. About the birthday party he was going to throw her when he got home. About the pink bicycle he had already bought and hidden in the garage. And when the helicopter finally came, blades chopping the air, Sarah helped load him on. She watched it lift off, carrying Barnes away. He survived. Because of her. Sarah opened her eyes. The apartment was dark now. She hadn't noticed the sun setting. She stood and walked to the window, looking down at the empty street below. Nobody here knew about Barnes. Or about the 12 other soldiers she had saved. Or about the night she had run through open fire to drag Lieutenant Diaz to safety after he stepped on a pressure plate. Or about the Bronze Star she had been awarded. Or about the scars on her back from shrapnel. Nobody asked. And when she tried to tell them, they didn't believe her. The next morning, Sarah went to the VA office in town. It was a small building next to the post office, staffed by one overworked administrator named Mr. Pullman. "I need help with my benefits," Sarah said. The disability claim was denied again. Mr. Pullman sighed and shuffled through papers. "Yeah, I see that. Says here you didn't provide enough documentation. I provided everything they asked for." "Well, apparently not." He glanced up at her, his expression weary. "Look, Miss Mitchell, Staff Sergeant Mitchell." He blinked. "Right, look, the system's backed up. You're not the only one waiting, just be patient. I've been patient for 3 months. Then be patient for 3 more. Sarah felt the anger rising in her chest, hot and sharp, but she swallowed it down. She nodded stiffly and left. Outside, she ran into Tom Hackett. Tom had been 2 years ahead of her in high school. Captain of the football team, prom king. Now he worked at his father's car dealership and spent his weekends at the American Legion bar. "Sarah Mitchell," he said, grinning. "Heard you were back. Tom, so what did you do over there? Cook meals for the boys?" He laughed loud and braying. Sarah's hands curled into fists. "I was a combat medic." Tom's grin widened. "Sure you were. And I'm a Navy SEAL." He slapped her on the shoulder. "Come on, Sarah, you don't gotta make stuff up. Everybody respects what you did, even if it was just, support stuff." He walked away, still laughing. Sarah stood there in the cold, her breath misting in the air. She had saved lives. She had bled. She had earned her place. But here, in this town, she was invisible. And no one believed a word she said. The Greenfield American Legion Post 247 sat at the edge of town, a squat brick building with a faded flag hanging out front. Every Thursday night, the veterans gathered there to drink cheap beer, play cards, and swap stories. Sarah had avoided the place for weeks. But tonight something pulled her there. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was the need to be around people who had served, even if they didn't respect her service. Maybe she just needed to feel like she belonged somewhere. She pushed open the door. The room went quiet. 12 men sat scattered around tables. Most of them were in their 60s and 70s. Vietnam vets mostly. A few from Desert Storm. One old-timer who claimed he had been in Korea. They stared at her. "Help you, miss?" The bartender was a thick-necked man named Dale. He had served in the Marines, or so he said. Sarah had her doubts. "I'm a veteran," Sarah said. "I'd like to join." Dale exchanged glances with the other men. A few of them smirked. "What branch?" One of them called out. "Army, combat medic. 2 tours in Afghanistan." The room erupted in laughter. "Combat medic," someone repeated mockingly. "Sweetheart, they don't let women in combat." "They do now," Sarah said, her voice steady. "Have since 2013. I was attached to infantry units. I ran patrols. I treated wounded under fire." An older man named Frank stood up. He had a gray beard and wore a Vietnam veteran cap. "Listen, honey, I don't know what they told you over there, but driving a supply truck ain't the same as combat." "I didn't drive supply trucks." "Then what did you do? Hand out Band-Aids at the FOB?" More laughter. Sarah felt her face flush. "I saved lives. I dragged wounded soldiers out of kill zones. I performed emergency surgery in the back of moving vehicles. I earned a Bronze Star for valor, Frank snorted. Bronze Star. They hand those out like candy now. Everybody gets a medal just for showing up. That's not true, Wang. Prove it, another man said. Show us, Sarah hesitated. She didn't carry her medals with her, didn't wear her uniform. She had packed all of it away in a box at the back of her closet because looking at it hurt too much. I don't have them with me, she said quietly. Convenient, Frank said. He sat back down and picked up his beer. Look, we got nothing against you, but this is a place for real veterans, people who actually saw the elephant. You want to play soldier? Go join a book club. The others laughed again. Sarah stood there for a long moment, her hands trembling. Then she turned and walked out. Behind her, she heard someone say, "Stolen valor." That's what that was. The door swung shut. Sarah sat in her car in the parking lot, gripping the steering wheel so hard her knuckles turned white. Stolen valor. They thought she was lying. They thought she was pretending. She wanted to scream. She wanted to march back in there and shove her DD-214 in their faces. Show them the scars. Make them see, but what was the point? They had already decided who she was. She drove home in silence. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. She thought about Barnes and his daughter Lily. She thought about Diaz, who sent her a Christmas card every year. She thought about the faces of the soldiers she had saved, the ones who remembered her, the ones who knew the truth, but they were far away now, scattered across the country, living their lives, and she was here, alone, in a town that didn't want her. At 2 a.m, she got out of bed and opened the closet. She pulled out the cardboard box from the back and set it on the floor. Inside were her uniforms, her boots, her medals. She lifted out the Bronze Star. The weight of it felt strange in her hand. She remembered the day she received it. The colonel had pinned it to her chest in a dusty ceremony on a forward operating base. Her platoon had cheered. Kowalski had hugged her. Diaz had saluted. Barnes had been there too, limping but alive. Sarah set the medal down and dug deeper into the box. At the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, was a photograph. Her unit. Alpha Company, 1st Battalion, 87th Infantry Regiment. 32 soldiers standing in the Afghan sun. Dust on their boots. Rifles in their hands. Exhaustion in their eyes. Sarah was in the front row, kneeling. The only woman, she stared at the faces. Some of them she would never see again. 3 had been killed in action. 2 had taken their own lives after coming home, and the rest were out there somewhere, trying to put the pieces back together. Just like her. The next day, Sarah went to the library. Greenfield Public Library was a small building on Oak Street, run by a kind woman named Mrs. Howell who remembered Sarah from when she was a child. Sarah Mitchell, Mrs. Howell said warmly. What brings you in today? I need to use a computer, Sarah said. Mrs. Howell led her to a row of old desktops in the back. Sarah sat down and logged into her email. She scrolled through messages. Most were spam. A few were from the VA, form letters about appointments and claims, but there was one from an address she recognized, Lieutenant Mark Diaz. She opened it. Sarah, hope you're doing okay. I know adjusting to civilian life is tough. It's been tough for me too. I wanted to let you know that some of us from the unit are planning a reunion next year. We're thinking about DC. Visit the memorials, see each other. Remember the ones we lost. I really hope you can make it. You're part of this family. You always will be. Stay strong. Mark Sarah read the message 3 times. A reunion. The thought of seeing them again filled her with a mixture of longing and dread. She missed them. God, she missed them. But she didn't know if she was ready. She typed a reply. Mark, thanks for reaching out. I'm in Indiana now. Trying to figure things out. I'll think about the reunion. Hope you're well. Sarah. She hit send and closed the browser. Mrs. Howell appeared beside her. Find what you needed? I think so. Mrs. Howell hesitated. Sarah, can I ask you something? Sure. I heard you were in the army, overseas. Sarah nodded. My grandson is over there now. Marines, Afghanistan. I worry about him every day. What's his name? Tyler. Tyler Howell. He's lucky to have you thinking about him, Sarah said. Mrs. Howell smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. Did you see much fighting? Sarah looked at her. Really looked at her. And in Mrs. Howell's face she saw genuine concern. Not doubt, not mockery. Just a grandmother worried about her grandson. Yes, Sarah said quietly. I did. Were you scared? Every day. Mrs. Howell reached out and squeezed her hand. Thank you for your service, dear. Truly. It was the first time anyone in Greenfield had said that and meant it. Sarah felt tears sting her eyes, but she blinked them away. Thank you, she whispered. Over the next few weeks, Sarah tried to build a life. She got a job at the grocery store stocking shelves on the night shift. The work was mindless, but it paid the bills. Her manager, a man named Rick, didn't ask questions. He didn't care where she had been or what she had done. He just needed someone who showed up on time. Sarah liked that, but the whispers followed her. In the break room, she overheard two co-workers talking. That's the girl who says she was in combat, one of them said. Yeah, right. My brother was in Iraq. He said women don't do that stuff. She probably just wants attention. Sarah kept her head down and said nothing. At the grocery store, at the coffee shop, at the post office, everywhere she went, people talked. And the story grew. Sarah Mitchell, the girl who lied about being a war hero. Sarah Mitchell, who made up stories to feel important. Sarah Mitchell, who disrespected real veterans with her fake claims. She stopped going out except for work. She stopped trying to explain. She stopped fighting. It was easier to be invisible. Then, one cold November morning, everything changed. Sarah was walking past the memorial park when she saw a crowd gathered near the bronze soldier statue. A new monument was being unveiled. She stopped. The mayor stood at a podium, his voice amplified by a microphone. Today we honor the men and women of Greenfield who served our nation in the global war on terror, Iraq, Afghanistan, and all the places in between. A large stone wall stood covered by a black cloth. Names were etched into the granite beneath. Sarah's chest tightened. These are our heroes, the mayor continued, our neighbors, our family, and we will never forget their sacrifice. He pulled the cloth away. The wall gleamed in the morning light. Gold letters spelled out the names of Greenfield residents who had served since 2001. Sarah scanned the list, and then she saw it. Halfway down. Third column staff SGT. Sarah J. Mitchell, TS Army Afghanistan, 2009-2011, 2012-2014 Bronze Star. Purple Heart, her breath caught. She stepped closer, her heart pounding. Purple Heart. She hadn't told anyone about that. The shrapnel wound in her back. The field hospital. The weeks of recovery. But there it was. Carved in stone, people began to notice her. Someone pointed, that's her name, a woman whispered. Frank from the American Legion stood nearby. He looked at the wall, then at Sarah. His face went pale. Tom Hackett was there too, holding his young son's hand. He stared at the monument, his mouth open. The crowd parted. Sarah stood in front of the wall, her fingers trembling as she reached out and touched her name. The mayor approached her. Are you Sarah Mitchell? She nodded, unable to speak. We've been trying to reach you, he said. We wanted you here for the unveiling. You're one of Greenfield's heroes. Sarah looked at the crowd, at the faces staring back at her, at Frank, at Tom, at all the people who had doubted her, and for the first time since coming home she felt seen. The silence in the park was deafening. Sarah stood before the memorial wall, her hand still resting on her own name. The cold granite felt solid beneath her fingertips. Real. Undeniable. Behind her, the crowd shifted uncomfortably. Frank from the American Legion cleared his throat. His Vietnam veteran cap sat crooked on his head, and his weathered face had gone red. He took a step forward, then stopped. I didn't know, he said, his voice rough. Sarah turned to face him. She didn't speak. She just looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. The Bronze Star, Frank continued, gesturing weakly at the wall. Purple Heart, we thought you were lying, Sarah finished for him. Her voice was quiet but firm. You thought I was lying. Frank's jaw worked, but no words came out. Tom Hackett stood frozen, his son tugging at his hand. The cocky grin he always wore had vanished. He looked smaller somehow. Younger. Sarah, I'm sorry, Tom said. I didn't. I shouldn't have. No, Sarah said. You shouldn't have. The mayor stepped between them, sensing the tension. Perhaps we should let Staff Sergeant Mitchell have a moment, he said diplomatically. This is a day of honor, of remembrance. But Sarah wasn't done. She looked at the crowd, at the faces of people she had known her whole life. People who had gone to church with her family, who had taught her in school, who had sold her ice cream when she was 10 years old, and not one of them had believed her. I came home 3 months ago, Sarah said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I came home to the town I grew up in. The town I thought would welcome me. The crowd shifted. Someone coughed. I tried to tell you what I did over there, what I saw, what I survived. But you didn't want to hear it. Because I don't look like what you think a soldier should look like. A woman in the crowd, Mrs. Patterson, who ran the flower shop, looked down at her feet. You made me feel like a liar, Sarah continued. Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. Like I was disrespecting the uniform by claiming I wore it. Do you know what that feels like? To have your service erased? To be invisible? Frank removed his cap and held it against his chest. Ma'am, I held dying men in my arms, Sarah said, her eyes locked on Frank. I performed surgery with mortars falling around me. I ran through gunfire to save lives. I earned every single one of those medals. And I earned the right to be believed. Tears streamed down her face now, but her voice didn't waver. So yes, I was there. Yes, I served. Yes, I bled for this country. And I don't need your permission to say it. The park was completely silent. Then slowly, Frank straightened. He placed his cap back on his head. And he raised his right hand in a crisp salute. Sarah stared at him. One by one, the other veterans in the crowd did the same. Old men with shaking hands. Middle-aged men in worn jackets. Even Tom Hackett, who had never served a day in his life, stood at attention with his hand over his heart. The mayor began to clap. Then Mrs. Howell from the library, then others. The applause spread through the crowd like a wave, growing louder and louder until it echoed off the buildings surrounding the park. Sarah stood there overwhelmed. She wanted to run. She wanted to disappear, but her feet wouldn't move. Frank lowered his salute and approached her. Up close, she could see the tears in his eyes. I'm sorry, he said. I'm an old fool. I thought I knew what war looked like. But I was wrong. And I'm sorry. Sarah nodded stiffly. She didn't trust herself to speak. Would you come back to the Legion? Frank asked. Let us make this right? Sarah looked past him at the memorial wall, at her name carved in stone. I'll think about it, she said. That night, Sarah's phone rang for the first time in weeks. It was Mrs. Howell. Sarah, dear, I hope I'm not bothering you. No, it's okay. I just wanted to say what you said today in the park. That took courage. Real courage. Mrs. Howell paused. My grandson Tyler called me tonight. From Afghanistan. He told me about the medics over there. How they're the bravest people he's ever seen. And I thought of you. Sarah's throat tightened. I'm proud to know you, Mrs. Howell continued. And I'm sorry it took so long for this town to see what I see. Thank you, Sarah whispered. After they hung up, Sarah sat in the darkness of her apartment. The applause from the park still rang in her ears. The salutes, the apologies, but it didn't erase the months of doubt, the loneliness, the nights she had cried herself to sleep, wondering if she had made it all up. If maybe they were right and she was wrong. She pulled out her laptop and opened her email. There was a new message from Lieutenant Diaz. Sarah, just saw the news. Someone from Greenfield posted about the memorial dedication online. Your name was in the article. I called Kowalski. He called Barnes. We all agreed. We're coming to see you. You shouldn't be alone right now. You've never been alone. You've always had us. We'll be there this weekend. Mark Sarah read the message 3 times. Then she closed the laptop and walked to the window. Outside, Greenfield looked different somehow. The streetlights glowed warmer. The buildings seemed less foreign. Maybe things could change. Maybe she could belong here after all. Friday evening, a dusty pickup truck pulled up in front of Sarah's apartment. She heard the doors slam and looked out the window. 3 men stood on the sidewalk, looking up at her building. Mark Diaz, broad-shouldered, with salt and pepper hair and the same easy smile she remembered. Eddie Kowalski, stocky and loud with a beard that hadn't existed in Afghanistan, and Corporal James Barnes, thinner than she remembered, walking with a slight limp but alive. Sarah's heart leaped. She ran down the stairs and burst through the front door. Surprise! Kowalski shouted, arms spread wide. Sarah crashed into him, then Diaz, then Barnes. They held each other in a tight circle, laughing and crying at the same time. "You came," Sarah said, her voice muffled against Diaz's shoulder. "Of course we came," Diaz said. "Your family." Barnes pulled back and looked at her. "Heard you've been having a rough time." "You could say that." "Well, we're here now," Kowalski said. "And we're going to fix it." "Fix it how?" Diaz grinned. "You'll see." Saturday morning, the four of them walked into the American Legion Post 247. The place was packed. Word had spread that Sarah was bringing guests and every veteran in Greenfield had shown up. Frank stood behind the bar looking nervous. Dale was beside him. When Sarah walked in with Diaz, Kowalski, and Barnes, the room went quiet. Diaz stepped forward. He wore his army dress uniform, medals gleaming on his chest. So did Kowalski and Barnes. "Gentlemen," Diaz said, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had led soldiers into battle. "My name is Lieutenant Mark Diaz, U.S. Army, retired. This is Sergeant Eddie Kowalski and Corporal James Barnes." He gestured to Sarah. "And this is Staff Sergeant Sarah Mitchell, the woman who saved my life." The room was silent. Diaz continued. "On March 14, 2013, our convoy was ambushed outside Kandahar. I stepped on a pressure plate. It didn't detonate, but I couldn't move. I was stuck, and the Taliban opened fire." He pointed at Sarah. She ran through open ground. No cover, bullets everywhere. She reached me, disarmed the pressure plate with her bare hands, and dragged me to safety. Then she treated my wounds while under fire. Kowalski stepped forward. "She saved my life too. Grenade blast, shrapnel in my leg. I was bleeding out. She kept me alive long enough for the medevac." Barnes limped forward. "She saved me, IED abdominal wound. She performed field surgery in the back of a Humvee while we were moving. Doctor said if she hadn't done what she did, I'd be dead." He looked around the room. "My daughter Lily is 6 years old now. She exists because of Sarah Mitchell." The three men turned and saluted Sarah. She stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. Frank stepped out from behind the bar. His hands shook as he approached. "Staff Sergeant Mitchell," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "On behalf of American Legion Post 247, I formally apologize for the disrespect we showed you. We were wrong. Dead wrong." He extended his hand. Sarah hesitated. Then she took it. "We'd be honored if you'd join us," Frank said. "Not as a guest. As a member." "As one of us." Sarah looked at Diaz, Kowalski, and Barnes. They nodded. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay." The room erupted in applause. That night, the Legion held a ceremony. They presented Sarah with a membership plaque. They bought her dinner. They asked her to speak. She stood at the front of the room, looking at the faces staring back at her. Old men who had fought in jungles. Middle-aged men who had fought in deserts. And now they were listening. "I didn't come home looking for glory," Sarah said. "I came home looking for peace. For a place to belong. I thought that would be easy. I thought people would understand." She paused. "But I learned something. Coming home is harder than going to war. Because over there you know who the enemy is. Over here the enemy is invisible. It's doubt. It's silence. It's being forgotten." She looked at Frank. "But today I'm not forgotten. Today I'm here. And that means something." The room was silent. Then Frank stood. "To Staff Sergeant Sarah Mitchell," he said, raising his beer. "A true American hero. To Sarah." The room echoed. She smiled. For the first time in months, she smiled. The weeks following the memorial dedication changed everything. Sarah's phone began ringing. The local newspaper wanted an interview. The high school asked if she would speak to students on Veterans Day. The VFW in the next town over invited her to their annual dinner. But the most surprising call came from Rick, her manager at the grocery store. "Sarah, I need to talk to you," he said one evening as she clocked in for her shift. She braced herself. She had missed 2 shifts the week before when Diaz, Kowalski, and Barnes were in town. "I know I was out," she began. Rick held up his hand. "That's not what this is about. I saw the memorial. I saw your name." He looked uncomfortable. "I didn't know. About what you did, what you went through." Sarah waited. "My daughter's applying to West Point," Rick continued. "She wants to serve. And when I told her about you, about a real combat veteran working here in our store, she asked if she could meet you." Sarah blinked. "Meet me?" "She needs to see that it's possible, that women can do what you did." Would Would you talk to her? Something loosened in Sarah's chest. Yes, she said. I'd be honored. Rick's daughter was 17. Her name was Emily. She came to the store the next day with a notebook full of questions. They sat in the break room during Sarah's lunch hour. Were you scared? Emily asked. Every single day, Sarah said honestly. How did you deal with it? I focused on the mission. On the people depending on me. Fear doesn't go away. You just learn to work through it. Emily scribbled notes furiously. Did people treat you differently because you're a woman? Sarah smiled sadly. Yes, over there and over here. But the soldiers I served with, the ones who mattered, they saw me for what I could do, not what I looked like. Like Lieutenant Diaz? Exactly like Lieutenant Diaz. Emily looked up from her notebook. Do you regret it? Serving? Sarah thought about that question. She had asked herself the same thing 100 times during the dark nights in her apartment. During the moments when the loneliness felt crushing. When the nightmares wouldn't stop. No, she said finally. I don't regret it. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, and it changed me. But I became someone I'm proud of. I saved lives. I made a difference, and no one can take that away from me. Emily smiled. I want to be like you. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Then be better than me. Be braver, be stronger, and don't let anyone tell you what you can't do. On Veterans Day, Sarah stood on the stage in Greenfield High School's auditorium. 300 students filled the seats. Teachers lined the walls. And in the front row sat Frank, Dale, and a dozen other members of the American Legion. The principal introduced her. Staff Sergeant Sarah Mitchell served 2 tours in Afghanistan as a combat medic. She was awarded the Bronze Star for Valor and the Purple Heart. She's a hero, and she's one of us. The students applauded politely. Sarah stepped to the microphone. She had prepared notes. Bullet points about service and sacrifice and duty. But standing there, looking at the young faces staring back at her, the words felt hollow. So she put the notes aside. When I was your age, Sarah began, I sat in those same seats. I walked these same halls, and I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. A few students nodded. I joined the army because I wanted to matter. I wanted to do something bigger than myself. And I found that. But I also found something I didn't expect. She paused. I found out that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done even when you're terrified. I found out that strength isn't about how much you can lift or how fast you can run. It's about how you treat people when everything's falling apart. The room was silent now. Every student was listening. I've held dying soldiers in my arms. I've made impossible decisions under fire. I've been wounded. I've been scared. I've been broken. Sarah's voice cracked, but she pushed forward. And when I came home, I thought the hard part was over. But it wasn't. Coming home was harder than war. Because over there, people saw what I could do. Over here, they only saw what I looked like. She glanced at Frank. He nodded. For months, I felt invisible. Like my service didn't matter. Like I didn't matter. People doubted me, mocked me, called me a liar. A few students shifted uncomfortably. But here's what I learned. The truth doesn't need permission. Your worth isn't determined by whether people believe you. It's determined by what you know in your heart. Sarah looked directly at the students. Some of you will serve in the military. Some of you won't. But all of you will face moments when people doubt you. When they tell you you're not good enough, not strong enough, not the right fit. She stepped closer to the edge of the stage. Don't let them define you. You define yourself. You prove them wrong. Not with words, but with action. With courage. With perseverance. The silence stretched. Then a girl in the 3rd row stood up and started clapping. Another student joined her. Then another. Within seconds, the entire auditorium was on its feet. Applauding. Sarah stood there, overwhelmed. She saw Emily in the crowd, tears streaming down her face. She saw Mrs. Howell in the back, smiling. She saw Frank saluting. And for the first time since coming home, Sarah felt like she belonged. After the assembly, students lined up to talk to her. They asked questions. They shook her hand. They thanked her for her service. One boy, maybe 16, hung back until everyone else had left. Ma'am, he said quietly. You don't have to call me ma'am, Sarah said. I'm not that old, he smiled nervously. My brother's in the Marines. He's deployed right now, and I worry about him all the time. What's his name? Jason. Jason's lucky to have you worrying about him. The boy nodded. When he comes home, if he has trouble adjusting. What should I do? Sarah's throat tightened. She thought about all the soldiers she knew who had come home to families that didn't understand, who felt isolated, alone. Listen to him, Sarah said, even if what he says doesn't make sense. Even if it's hard to hear. Just listen, and remind him that he's not alone. The boy's eyes were wet. Thank you. He walked away and Sarah realized something. This was why she had come home. Not to be celebrated, not to be honored, but to help others navigate the same dark waters she had struggled through. That evening, Sarah returned to the memorial park. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the stone wall. She stood in front of her name, running her fingers over the engraved letters. Thought I'd find you here. Sarah turned. Frank stood a few feet away, his hands in his pockets. Mind if I join you? He asked. Sarah shook her head. Frank walked over and stood beside her, looking at the wall. Vietnam was different, he said after a moment. We came home and people spit on us. Called us baby killers. We learned to keep our heads down. To not talk about it. Sarah stayed quiet. I think that's why I didn't believe you at first, Frank continued. Because in my mind, women weren't in combat. They weren't in danger. And I couldn't imagine a world different from the one I knew. He turned to face her. But I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Truly sorry. Sarah met his eyes. She saw genuine remorse there. Genuine shame. I forgive you, she said. Frank's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank you. They stood in silence, watching the sun sink below the horizon. You know, Frank said, the Legion's planning a fundraiser for the VA. We want to help veterans like you get the benefits they deserve, and we'd like you to help organize it. Sarah looked at him. Me? You're one of us now. And we take care of our own, Sarah smiled. Okay, I'll help. Over the next few months, Sarah's life transformed. She quit the grocery store and took a job at the VA office, helping other veterans navigate the system that had frustrated her so much. Mr. Pullman, the overworked administrator, was relieved to have the help. You understand what they're going through, he said. That makes all the difference. Sarah worked with veterans of all ages, Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam, even a few from Korea. She helped them file claims. She listened to their stories. She reminded them that they weren't alone. The American Legion fundraiser raised $15,000. They used the money to create a support group for returning veterans. Sarah led it. Every Tuesday night, a dozen veterans gathered at the Legion. They talked about their struggles, their nightmares, their fears, and slowly they healed together. Emily, Rick's daughter, got accepted to West Point. She called Sarah to tell her the news, crying with joy. I did it, Emily said. I'm going. I'm so proud of you, Sarah said. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have. But I'm glad I got to be part of your journey. 1 year after the memorial dedication, Sarah stood in the same park. But this time, she wasn't alone. Lieutenant Diaz stood beside her. So did Kowalski and Barnes. They had returned for the anniversary, along with a dozen other members of their old unit. The mayor gave a speech. Frank said a few words, and then they asked Sarah to speak. She stepped to the microphone and looked at the crowd. It was larger this year. More people. More faces. A year ago, Sarah began, I stood in front of this memorial and saw my name for the first time. I felt seen, validated, believed. She paused. But the real change didn't happen that day. It happened in the days and weeks and months that followed. When people apologized, when they listened, when they opened their hearts. Sarah looked at Frank, who nodded. This memorial isn't just a list of names. It's a promise. A promise that we won't forget, that we'll honor the sacrifices made, that we'll take care of those who served. She gestured to the veterans gathered around her. Every person on this wall has a story. Some of those stories are painful. Some are triumphant. But all of them matter, and all of them deserve to be heard. Sarah's voice grew stronger. So today I challenge you. Don't just read the names on this wall. Learn the stories behind them. Reach out to the veterans in your life. Listen to them. Support them. Because they gave everything for this country, and they deserve everything in return. The crowd erupted in applause. Diaz put his arm around Sarah's shoulders. You did good, Sergeant. We did good, Sarah corrected. Barnes limped forward and placed a hand on the memorial wall, right next to Sarah's name. "You saved my life," he said quietly. "And now you're saving others. That's the real mission." Sarah looked at her name. Carved in stone. Staff SGT. Sarah J. Mitchell. It wasn't just a name anymore. It was a legacy. That night, Sarah sat in her apartment, the same small space above the pharmacy, but it felt different now. It felt like home. Her phone buzzed. A text from Emily. "Just finished my first week at West Point. It's brutal, but I keep thinking about what you said. Fear doesn't go away. You just work through it. Thank you for everything." Sarah smiled and typed back, "You've got this. Make me proud." Another text came in. This one from Frank. "Next Tuesday. Veterans Group. We've got 3 new members joining. See you there." Sarah set her phone down and walked to the window. Outside, Greenfield was quiet. The streetlights glowed. A light rain began to fall. She thought about everything that had happened. The doubt, the pain, the loneliness, but also the redemption, the forgiveness, the healing. She thought about the soldiers she had saved, the lives she had touched, the difference she had made, and she realized something. Her war hadn't ended in Afghanistan. It had followed her home. But unlike the war overseas, this one she had won, not with weapons or violence, but with truth. With courage. With the simple act of refusing to be invisible. Sarah closed her eyes and whispered the words she had carried with her for so long. "I am Staff Sergeant Sarah Mitchell. I served, I bled, I survived." She opened her eyes. "And I matter." Outside, the rain fell softly on the memorial in the park, on the stone wall where her name stood among heroes. A name that could no longer be doubted. A name that would never be forgotten.